Ding 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 ding. Ding 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 ding. Ding 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 ding. Ding 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 ding. Gratefully, that's about all I could do in a banjo duel. And a very famous banjo duel at that. And those of you older than 40 surely recognize that tune. Today we're going to a very special place, and you'll find out why I'm mimicking a banjo. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures Podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. On this show, my goal and my mission is to inspire and empower you to lead a bigger life through adventure travel. We go to amazing destinations from around the world. And in fact, I try to answer the questions, the who, what, where, and when. But one thing we don't really do a lot of here because it's not part of the mission statement is the how. And I'm pleased to announce that sometime this week it's going to be released. It's ready. It's in production. It just takes a few days for it to go through the systems in the Great White Web and all that. But I'm releasing a companion podcast called the Adventure Travel Show Podcast. So I encourage you to add that to your rotation. This is going to come out on alternate Thursdays from this show. So now you could add a little bit of adventure to each week. The new show is going to teach you the hows to adventure travel. We'll cover how to plan, how to train, how to prepare, how to pack, how to purchase things at the right prices, anything that you need to do and to know how to do. That show is going to give you the tools and the knowledge that you need to have a successful adventure vacation. So be sure to sign up for that. I'd appreciate you passing the word and getting the word out about the podcast. I'm super excited about it. It's going to be a lot more work, but I think it will complement this show tremendously. So again, that's the Adventure Travel Show Podcast. So if you would, pause right now, look it up, and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Thanks. So why am I doing a dueling banjo? For those of you, like I said, that are over 40 and probably around 50 or more, that will bring you back to the 70s to a movie called Deliverance. And I know that was a scary movie. In fact, I rewatched it last week, and it shows how jaded we've become. It was shocking when it came out, and particularly this one particular scene. And now we've just seen so many awful things in the movies since then that it was not near as shocking to me at all on the rerun. Frankly, what shocked me was the offensive portrayal of the mountain people far more than the violence. The Dueling Banjos scene is when the outsider vacationers going on the canoe ride meet the locals in town. So the Dueling Banjos was my attempt to mimic that, frankly, offensive scene of meeting the locals and the iconic tune that we most remember from Deliverance. Another interesting thing, and the reason that I bring that up, is the very first scene of the movie Deliverance. You see the desecration of a mountain, where they're destroying the mountain to create a dam. You don't know that's what they're doing, but that's what that scene is. And in fact, it's that very desecration that created the jewel of the lake that we're going to visit today. So like anytime there's a damming project, there's controversy because you're going to lose the fertile valleys and people's homes are going to be displaced, and the history just kind of wiped out because the damming of this confluence of four rivers created this massive 7,500 acre lake that's 300 feet deep as a reservoir. It was a joint partnership with the state of South Carolina and Duke Power. And they've got 90 miles of virtually wild, untouched shoreline. There remains today less than 40 homes are allowed on the property. And the access to the lake is virtually by boat, and you have to get there through the Devil's Fort State Park, which is where we're going to go. So the lake is called Lake Jocassee, and we're going to Devil's Fort State Park. And you say, oh, state parks. I learned something really special and important from my mom and dad. Some states have got it going on when it comes to state parks, and South Carolina, Georgia, and West Virginia are three of them that have wonderful facilities. Even if you have no interest in adventure, we rented a cabin right on the lake, really affordable. And when I'm talking cabin, I'm saying granite countertops, fireplace, huge screened-in porch, lovely furnishings, really, really nice, very affordable, beautiful A-frame cabins right on the lake in the woods. It was absolutely magical. And I can see why over the decades, my mom and my dad would repeatedly go back there. So even if you have no interest whatsoever in going out on the water, if you just need a restful, beautiful, affordable place to stay, this is a wonderful option. And when I'm saying affordable, for the cost of a modest hotel, we had a house right on the lake, a beautiful vista of the lake. It was unbelievable. And not only was the kitchen fully furnished with all the utensils and apparatus that you might need, but also the linens, which is nice because a lot of rental homes, you have to bring your own linens. If you're flying in, you don't have to worry about that. So to give you a little backstory, my mom and dad were true adventure sports travelers. In retirement, they had fun. They went anywhere, mainly in the southeast of the United States, any place there was something fun to do. They have hiked the trails and paddled the trails and mountain biked the trails. If it was fun and beautiful, they went. And one place they would repeatedly go, and I've heard about for the last couple of decades, is Lake Jocassee. Mom now, and Mom you met in episode 10 on the 15 benefits of adventure travel, which I'll put a link in the show notes. Mom is 93. Actually, I'll call her 93 and a half because I think when you get to be that age, you get to start counting your half years again. Every time she talks about Lake Jocassee, which actually is fairly regularly, it always brings a smile to her face, and you could just see all the fond memories. And as she's now getting a little bit more frail, I thought it would be great if she had a vacation. And I wanted to see this Lake Jocassee I'd heard so much about myself. So we packed our bags, booked a cabin right on the lake at the state park, and I'll give you the details of that too in the show notes. And off we went. For us, it's about a full day's drive because we live on the coast of North Carolina, and it's way down at the northwestern point of South Carolina, just south of the town that I hope to retire in North Carolina. And if you're interested in learning about that area, check out episode number 22 on Pisgah National Forest, which I'll also link to in the show notes and the website. So when we get there, we check in and enjoy our cabin overlooking the beautiful foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains and Lake Jocassee. The name Jocassee comes from the legend of a Cherokee maiden. From an Oconee tribe, the Brown Vipers, led by Chief Atakulia, inhabited the west side of the Whitewater River when a rival tribe, the Greenbirds, lived on the east. Legend says that a young Greenbird warrior, Nagoches, was not afraid to enter Brown Viper hunting grounds. On one occasion, he fell and broke his leg and was convinced he was going to die. Then he heard Jocassee, Atakulia's daughter, who brought him back to her father's lodge and nursed him back to health. Jocassee eventually fell in love with him, but in a later battle, Chiochi, Jocassee's brother, killed and brought Nagochi's head back on his belt. Legend has it that Jocassee went into the water and did not sink, but walked across the water to meet the ghost of Nagochi. The name Jocassee means place of the lost one. This area remained Cherokee territory until a war back in the late 1700s and an eventual treaty gave the Lake Jocassee Gorges area, with the exception of Oconee County, to the United States. The area was mostly settled by Irish and Scots. And to give you an idea how beautiful this area is, some of the scenes from the Hunger Games were filmed here. So besides looking at the beautiful scenery, what can you do here on Lake Jocassee? You can boat, you can kayak or canoe, and you can hike. There are no mountain bike trails. And so those would be the three activities that we're talking about today. And also those, like I said, the fishing here is spectacular, and people come from all over the world to fish some of the massive trout and bass that are found in this lake. One fun thing to do, and I would highly recommend, is taking one of the half-day boat tours to give you a feel for the lake itself. It's a really nice guided tour on a pontoon boat, which I consider the most fun boat out there. And it's a nice, well-maintained boat with a local guide that will show you some of the cooler places to see. And they know what's blooming where and when, and can tell you the history of a lot of the fun things that are done there. And so Mom and I were able to do that. That was something she was able to do. So we had a beautiful weather day. And fortunately, that's the day that we had reserved to go out on this tour. And I could just see her. I think back on listening right now. I just saw just the memories just flooding her brain on that trip. And it was such a treat to be able to do that with my mom. While I did hike the smaller trail that's located on the park, I did not want to leave Mom for the length of time it would take me to do some of the long distance trail that's right outside the park. And so I wanted to get a behind the scenes look at what are the things that we can do here. And so after the trip, I asked our guide, who's fabulous and local, and her family had been there for generations, and she was telling us such great stories and historical stories on the boat ride. Could I interview her for this show? And gratefully, she said yes, and said there's some other people, too, that we want to make sure that they can tell us a bit more detail about some of the things I'm not as familiar with. So after the tour, I sat down with 4 of the local folks that live and breathe this lake and know that lake better than anybody probably out there. And what follows is our conversation. We are sitting on the pontoon boat, so sometimes you're going to hear a boat pulling out and all that, and I apologize for that. But I was so blessed just to have the generosity of their time to sit down, and you could just see their love of this lake and how, even though it might have had a little funky beginning as damming a river might do, this has now turned into a true jewel and treasure for the community and the area, and they are justly and rightly proud of this absolute gem that they have that they call Lake Jocassee. So I'm sitting here on a pontoon boat with my tour guide from our Mom and Mai's boat tour, Cheryl White, and then also Dan Witten, Zach Maddox, and the co-owner of Jocassee Lake Tours, Brooks Wade. Jocassee Lake Tours is a really cool company. They are so flexible about, you need to do this? Yeah, we can arrange that. Oh, you want to bring your kayaks out there? Yeah, we'll take care of that. You want to hike on this long distance trail? Oh, we'll drop you off. We'll pick you up later. So it's really cool to have a company that is not so, this is the plan and this is all we do. In fact, they also work in conjunction with Clemson, Furman, Wofford, and Anderson universities on their lifelong learning programs. Not in addition to the pontoon tours and kayaking tours, they do guided hikes and they do presentations locally to help people learn about the culture and the history of the area. So they just, like I said, they live and breathe this area, and I'm so lucky to get them to sit down and to tell some of their stories, some of the history, and the things that we can do in their beautiful neck of the woods. To begin with, what makes this place so special?
Oh my goodness! Do we have an hour here? Would that be okay?
We don't have an hour, but we have.
National Geographic in 2012 declared the Jocassee Gorges, and Lake Jocassee sits right in the midst of the Jocassee Gorges as one of the 50 last great wild places on Earth to visit. Wow. And there's so many reasons for that. It is an isolated, spectacular part of the southern Appalachian Mountains. We get more waterfalls per square mile than anywhere in the United States, continental United States. It rains a lot here, produces a lot of waterfalls, rivers, creeks. Wildlife is spectacular, and it's isolated. There's not a lot of people here at all. Lake Jocassee itself, where we operate from, has 37 houses on nearly 90 miles of shoreline. It's just a very quiet, very isolated place with extraordinary wildlife. Plant diversity is unmatched in the eastern United States. Just a totally remarkable place. We get people now, thanks to National Geographic, we get people from all over the world that come to witness where we spend our time almost every day.
And what's your favorite time of year?
The time that we're discussing. Any time that we discuss that is my favorite time of year.
It does get busy in the summer.
Summer is summer on a body of water. It gets busy with the most fun on a summer day you will ever have in your life is had on Lake Jocassee. I was raised in Florida, born in a pool somewhere. I've been wet all my life from swimming, and this is the most swimmable body of water I've ever found in my life.
And there's no heat wave on Jocassee once you leave the dock.
None. No heat wave, no mosquitoes. This place does not have mosquitoes. In the summer, you can't buy a mosquito bite all summer long. It's just they're not here.
Even on the shore?
Even on the shore. Now, if you hike back into the mountains, you might find some still water, but along the edges, there's no standing water to breed mosquitoes whatsoever. It is because of the terrain is incredibly steep here as it falls off of the southern Blue Ridge Escarpment and into the lake. So it's just almost a bug-free place. And in the summer, find that in the southeast. I don't know any other place that is like that, but right here. When you have a body of water in the summer that is not bug-infested throughout the summer months.
Does it get humid?
No. Relative to the whole area, this is a remarkably humidity-free area. Very pleasant. The hottest place on the lake is in the parking lot of Devil's Fork State Park. Once you get away from the dock, you don't even think about heat the rest of the day.
So let us in on a secret area or place that we would never be able to find in a brochure that only somebody like you, a local, would know. So spill and let us know about a great secret place.
The upper reaches of the Thompson River. I think everyone that works with us would agree is not only the most beautiful part of this lake, but the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. The wildest place. It's the wildest part of the river. It has a sense of a primordial earth when you go up in there. You just feel like, okay, now I know what a wilderness is.
It looks like God just made this today.
Fresh off the palate of God. Absolutely. Everything about it is diverse, wet waterfalls, pools to swim in, spectacular river. It's just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. You will not find it in a brochure. You won't find that in the literature. You won't find it described. But everybody that I know of that we work together would say basically the same thing I'm telling you.
Sweet. Are we allowed to camp there?
You can't camp there. You can't camp anywhere on the shores of Lake Jocassee except in designated campsites.
Okay.
So, no, you could sleep on a boat. That's legal, but you can't sleep on the shore up the way.
Okay.
But the terrain is really not suitable for that anyway.
Too steep.
Yeah, really be hard to find a place.
So it's just too steep. But we could make a day trip out of it, and you could drop us off and pick us up.
Absolutely. And you can day hike the Foothills Trail that Dan was describing. The most challenging part of it is the traverse of the Jocassee Gorges, which is roughly 30 miles across here. And you can section hike that. So you can day hike all the way across, but it requires boat assistance on parts of it, which is a service we provide.
And since we brought up camping, there's a nice campsite at the park, but there's also another interesting camping area that's accessible only by boat. Can you tell us about that?
Boat in. You get outhouses or your only amenity. And it's a popular campground used a lot by youth groups, church groups, summer camps, all of that, and meet-up groups. It's half the price, basically, of what the mainland campground is for Devil's Fork State Park, and incredibly quiet. I would say that you better like frogs, because that is one froggy place at sunset in the early evening. But other than that, it's a quiet, wonderful place.
Where's the best place to watch the sunset?
Middle of the lake. Absolutely in the middle of the lake. So you can see all the way around you and watch all the colors.
When the full moon's coming up about the same time.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful.
What else is special that I may not have read in a brochure?
Yeah, you asked me what season is my favorite. Yeah. And, in fall and late fall, it has the greatest diversity of hardwood trees of anywhere in the southeast, anywhere in the United States. And therefore, it produces an unbelievably beautiful fall. And then after the fall is over, we get a population of common loons that is most unusual, about 150 birds every winter, and some other associated birds that spend their winter here that becomes the life of the lake for several months. And birders from all over this part of the world come and enjoy the lake in winter for that reason. So lots of loons, and if you're a person who knows anything about that, it really makes it quite a spectacular winter.
Any other birds of note?
Horned grebes and several kinds of gulls that come, Bonaparte's gulls and ring-billed gulls, and a lot of winter bird life. So it's pretty exciting around here in that way.
Bald eagles.
Bald eagles. Well, we have 2 on the nest right now.
Cheryl showed us the nest.
So you saw the nest today, didn't you?
So let's shift gears and get into the water. Let's talk about paddling, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, etc.
Well, as a company, we don't do paddleboard tours, but although we would accommodate it for others that want to. But we do kayak tours beginning in May through October. And this lake is probably the most popular flat water paddling destination in the southeast at this point. There's just tons of kayakers here that really enjoy it. And paddleboard, an up-and-coming sport, which was a coastal event when paddleboarding began. And now it's all the lakes have them, and it's incredibly popular. So we rent kayaks, but we really encourage people to do tours with us. What makes us unique about how we do our tours is this is a great big lake. And the wildest parts of the lake are not anywhere close to the main dock, which is basically the only place you can depart from on Lake Jocassee. So we tow our kayaks with the pontoon boat to the wildest parts of the lake and then paddle those areas, which are basically too far for most paddlers to get to starting from the state park itself. So we do try to make it interesting and diverse and expose people as paddlers to parts of the lake that they would probably never see without a little motorboat assistance to get there.
And roughly how long are those tours?
Basically all day. We do 6-hour kayak tours, and it's not 6 hours of paddling because there's transportation time getting to the different destinations that we go to. It's intended to be a leisurely event, not hard on the body and good for the spirit is how we say it. So 2 or 3 hours of paddling time and transportation time and lunch on the boat, and we take swims, and we make it where it's fun and you're not a whipped person at the end of the experience. So, and we get people doing that from kids to people in their 80s. So we accommodate the entire range of people that might want to do something.
So is this something like today where you sign up and whoever shows up that has a reservation goes, or do you do custom?
We do it both ways. Some private groups charter us, and also every other week, starting in May, all the way through the summer months, we will do a kayak tour that people can sign up for, just like you did today.
Okay. And what's the minimum for a private tour?
It's generally 6 people or so makes it where it works out for us. So we can accommodate up to 15 people. So sometimes we get a crowd and we'll be towing 14 or 15 boats behind us, which is a pretty colorful event when you got a lot of fiberglass and plastic boats, every one of them a different color. It's pretty.
Do they need to have any kayaking experience?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. The boats we have are carefully selected so that people don't have to have particular paddling skills to paddle. And if anybody is totally inexperienced, any one of the guides leading the day will give them some special attention at the first 30 minutes.
Instruction and you're good.
Yeah, that's all it takes. It's just really easy. If you have the right boat, it's not hard to do. And they're not tippy. You're not likely to fall in. That just doesn't happen.
And I heard too that even though there's a lot of boats here, once they get out in the lake, they scatter so it doesn't seem so crowded.
And at the dock, you think this is a crowded place. And if you go to the 3 or 4 most popular waterfalls on the lake, you can also think that. But when you get away from those areas and away from this dock, and it becomes a wilderness lake very quickly.
What else is important to know?
Sunsets here are like no other.
I've got a great photo from the cabin from last night that I'll post on the website.
Excellent. And we do special tours for seniors that are the length of which are a little shorter and more appropriate for their abilities at that stage. Very safe and a pretty meaningful thing that we do, because thanks to the dock at Devil's Fork State Park and the design of pontoon boats, we can accommodate people with wheelchairs and walkers. And
my mom's 93. We brought her
out today. And your mom was on here today, and that's not a bit unusual for us, and we encourage it, because people that are at a point in their life that they can't physically go explore a wilderness. Right. This Lake Jocassee leads you like a water highway into the wildest places you could possibly get in the eastern United States, and it doesn't matter your age, because we can take you to these places. So that's a particularly important part of what we do.
And soon to come is a certificate study program featured with Lake Jocassee featured, doing different studies on geology, doing studies on birds, doing studies on plants and habitats. We'll have a full range of classes offered that you can take independently or all together to achieve a certificate. That will be offered through Jocassee Lake Tours.
I tried to pin Brooks down once more about his favorite season.
I might be the only guy that would say winter, but we operate right through the winter and have a reasonably good following in winter months. And the waterfalls in winter are unencumbered.
Try a frozen waterfall tour next winter. That is just spectacular. All these little waterfalls that you don't even know are there. When they get icy and shine, they're shining up there on the mountainsides, and that's fun to see. But when you get to all these icicles hanging down, you get behind an icicle curtain, take your photographs. That's going to be cool.
And we call those pop-up tours because it doesn't happen every winter. It has to be cold enough, and this is South Carolina, and it doesn't always get cold enough to freeze waterfalls. But when it does, we have a newsletter that people that pay attention to us open every week, every Sunday, and we'll let you know when it's happening, and we'll get you out there at those special times that nature provides that you can't schedule, because you don't know when it's going to happen until when it happens, and then we go from there and do pop-up tours.
So let's talk about your winter weather for a minute. Does it get snowy that you need technical skills to hike, or can you do winter hikes?
No, you do not. We actually, I think most of us wish we got a little more snow than we get. A few inches a year is what we seem to receive in this area.
What would you say your average nighttime temps are in January and February?
January, February, 30s, 40s. This is a mild elevation.
Dan mentioned a special tour that you guys offer. Tell us about that.
South Carolina's most eminent naturalist is Dr. Patrick McMillan, who works through Clemson University. And once a month, the first Sunday of every month, we do a tour with Patrick. 4 hours, and you better take notes, because you're going to learn more in 4 hours than you'll ever learn in your life about the lake. So all of us that work here are pretty darn knowledgeable, and we all learn a bunch on those trips ourselves when we get a chance to go. But that's something that we are very pleased to be able to do, and we've been doing that for, I don't know, a couple of years now.
So that's once a month?
Once a month, first Sunday of every month. First Sunday expeditions. It's a lot of fun.
So now let's shift gears and let's get back on land and talk about your long-distance hiking trail that's in the area here, the Foothills Trail.
Okay, the Foothills Trail is a foot travel-only trail that connects Oconee State Park in South Carolina to Table Rock State Park. It is 77 miles, so it's a mid-distance hiking trail. It is visited by people all over the United States. People from other countries come here as well. It's well-known Foothills Trail. We have a Foothills Trail Conservancy board that Brooks and I are both members of, so we get a lot of information on what's happening of it. Duke Energy has helped establish this trail, and in fact they maintain a 44-mile section of that 77 miles. The other 33 miles of it is maintained by different captains along they have trail captains that maintain a certain section, maybe 10 miles or 5 miles of the trail. So we keep it well maintained. We have a website where people can write in their blogs, and we hear lots of great comments. We do free shuttles for people that come along needing to. They maybe bring their car and they need a shuttle to hike to their car, for instance. We also do boat shuttles. Brooks and Kay are primarily involved with that, doing boat shuttles to people who want to hike the most remote section of the Foothills Trail, which is the 16 miles around the northern end of Lake Jocassee. That is not accessible except by trail or by boat. There are lots of other places on the trail where you can access by road and do day hikes, but people can either through hike it or they can do day hikes and section hike it. If you do through hike it or section hike it and you're a member of the Foothills Trail Conservancy, you get a patch called the Peregrine Award, which is to be sought after, to sew on your jacket or your pack. And it is through the heart of the mountains of the upstate of Carolina. Waterfalls galore.
How hard is this trail? Are you going up and down? You're on the ridge? Or tell us a little bit about what we can expect.
The trail does have quite a bit of elevation gain. It does go to the highest point in South Carolina, which is Sassafras Mountain of 3553. It does pass some significant waterfalls, some little waterfalls. There's different campsites. A lot of the Boy Scouts, they will do eagle projects on the Foothills Trail and put maybe in a little cistern or enhance a campsite in some way as an eagle project or put in a bench. The diversity of wildflowers and trees is just amazing in the upstate of South Carolina, and the Foothills Trail is really a showcase of that. Part of the Foothills Trail hikes along the Chattooga River, which is a national wild and scenic river, the first one created back in 1974. So that's a wonderful part of the trail. And like I said, it ends up in Oconee State Park or Table Rock State Park, which has a lot of attractions as well.
Do you have to carry your food for the whole hike, or are there places that you can get resupply?
When I through hiked it, the way I did it was I did a cache. I did a hideout. I buried a 5-gallon can of food and also some clothes in that can. So as I was hiking, 4 days in, I had this cache to finish me my last 3 days. So then I had to make 3 trips before the hike, during the hike, and after the hike to get to my cache. Now, other people will do it different ways where they can carry enough food for 7 days. I didn't want to carry that much weight. Right. I had to have enough pack without an extra few days of food.
And sounds like you have plenty of access to water.
Yeah, there was, every time I got thirsty or empty, God provided what I needed when I needed it. That's the way I felt about it. That was a tremendous pilgrimage for me.
What time of year would you recommend?
I went in late March. In late March, I had days when I was hiking in T-shirts and shorts, and then I had days that I was being snowed on and almost hypothermic. But that was a good wildflower time of year. Water was running good. The waterfalls were full. So March and fall are probably the prime times to hike that trail. Wintertime, you have the tremendous vistas, a little colder temperature, so the warmer bag, a heavier bag to carry would be the thing. But summertime, you do have places that you can cool off in streams, but that's not my style to hike in hot weather.
If you're not sure how to treat water while you're hiking in the wild, and because water's heavy, you don't want to carry all your water needs for the day, listen to episode number 3 of my new Adventure Travel Show podcast that explains the different ways that you can treat, and so you can help determine the best way for you to stay safe and well hydrated while you're out in the trails. While I was out in the boat tour with Cheryl, there was a buoy out in the middle of the lake, and so we were curious as to what that was there for. And she said that That marks the spot of the Baptist Church cemetery, so the relatives here can still come out and pay their respects to their loved ones. And actually, that site is now used a lot by scuba divers. There's a big scuba area, and they'll go down and they'll upright a tipped-over headstone and all that kind of stuff, and they'll still see some remnants of the town. And Cheryl's got an interesting story about her family that I wanted you to hear.
I am a native of Oconee County. I was born and raised here, and so most of my family is from this area. When I started with Jocassee Lake Tours a couple of seasons ago, I began to research some of the information of the history of this area and the Jocassee Valley. Claudia Whitmire-Hembry has written a book entitled Jocassee Valley. In reading her book, I discovered that my great-great-grandfather, Daniel Littleton, was the first recorded pastor of Mount Carmel Baptist Church, which actually sat here in the valley, on the valley floor. When Duke Energy created this lake, they removed most all of the structures from the valley floor, and they did load Mount Carmel Baptist Church up on a trailer and moved it to another location. It is still in operation today, but to have found out that my great-great-grandfather was the first actual recorded pastor of the church was pretty interesting, pretty amazing. Also, I have family, again, from the whole area, and I had a great-great-great-grandfather whose name was Billy Corbin. He settled in an area up along Howard's Creek, and there's a stream flowing into Howard's Creek called Corbin Creek. That area is where my grandfather settled and raised his family, built his home. He had a farm and lots of livestock, and so he would transport his livestock up into the horse pasture river that flows into what is now Lake Jocassee, and he would allow his livestock to graze in the horse pasture basin. And after the Civil War, when Sherman's army and the soldiers were coming into the area, my grandfather had hidden his livestock up there in that basin, and the soldiers wanted him to reveal where he had hidden his animals, and he refused to tell them where he had them hidden. So from a letter that was written by a great uncle of mine, this is how I came about this information and learned this story. The soldiers actually hung my great-great-grandfather up by his thumbs, and in order to get him to disclose where his belongings were, and he refused to tell them where he had hidden his livestock. My grandmother begged the soldiers not to harm him, to cut him down, not to kill him, because she needed his help in raising their children. So they did show mercy on him. They cut him down, but unfortunately that act of hanging him up by his thumbs ruined his hands.
We've talked a bit about the abundance of wildflowers in this area. The most famous of all is the local Oconee bell, found just in this region. When I was here in mid-April, I was at the tail end of the 2019 show of the Oconee bell, and it's a cute little flower that hugs the banks of the many, many creeks here. The discovery of this interesting flower has a great backstory. I asked them to share it with us.
Andre Michaud was sent over here by the King of France to collect plants that were going to be interesting from a different place in the world to those people in France. So he came over here, and in 1787 he comes up the Savannah River, the Kiwi River, and comes to these two rushing torrents feeding into the Kiwi River in June of 1787 and finds a little plant which he collected some of, and he sends specimens back to France from time to time. His first time up in this area, and he saw these mountains out here, and he wrote down there possible new species in the high mountains of the Carolinas. And he made that notation and could not name it because it was not in flower. He just got a leaf, a rhizome, a flower scape, and a seed. So 40 years later, Asa Gray is an American botanist, the father of American botany, went to France and was looking through the arboretum there, and he found this specimen that was unnamed. And during Asa Gray's time, it was okay to name things by its leaf and other characteristics that he had available. So he called it Shortia galacifolia. Shortia after his friend Charles Short, and galacifolia because it looks like Galax, the leaf does. But he spent the next 40 years looking for this plant in the high mountains, which was, to him, Roan Mountain, Mount Mitchell, Grandfather Mountain. He never thought to look down at these lower elevations. And finally, 90 years after Michaud found it in 1817, a teenager, George Hyams, found this little white flower and gave it to his dad, who was collecting different plants for the pharmaceutical industry. His dad did not know what this was. It was a little white bell-shaped flower and leaves, and he sent it up to another botanist in Philadelphia. He didn't know what it was. He sent it to Asa Gray, and Asa Gray looked at it. Finally, after 40 years, I see this plant, the shorty that he'd been looking for. So he came down a few years later and did see the plant in the Marion, North Carolina, on the Catawba Basin. But it wasn't until later on that Charles Sargent came following Michaud's journals and discovered where it was originally discovered here on the banks of the Kiowee River.
So there's a bit of a punchline to this story. Tell us.
It was found by a man that never named it. It was named by a man who could not find it, and was named after a man that never saw it. That's Michaud, Gray, and Charles Short.
I'm glad he finally was able to see it after devoting his entire 40-year career to locating this flower. Well, I don't normally cover fishing on this show. Because fishing is such a big part of Lake Jocassee, I have to spend just a couple minutes on it. In fact, Lake Jocassee fish have the state record for bass and trout in 5 categories. In fact, I got a funny story about that too. One of my mom's friends, another couple, joined mom and dad at Lake Jocassee once, and the wife had never fished before. And so on her very first time fishing in Lake Jocassee, she ends up catching the woman's record. Mom couldn't remember if it was for a bass or a trout, but in her very first time fishing that day, she gets a state record. I don't know if it still holds or not. We didn't take the trouble to go back and look, but she's telling her husband, I don't see what's so hard about all this, which I think is kind of fun. So anyway, I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes here telling a little bit about the fishing in this area. And since I don't know much about fishing, I have asked one of the best fishermen in the area to share some of his insights.
Well, Lake Jocassee, according to DNR, is the only lake in the state that actually has trout. However, the lake right below us, Kiowee, every once in a while a trout will be caught out of there because the East Otoe River is stocked with trout and it does flow into Lake Kiowee. So every blue moon, someone will catch a trout on Kiowee, but Lake Jocassee is actually described as a trophy trout lake, and it has to earn that title. And this is a very young lake and a very small lake compared to the other ones around us. But however, Jocassee is actually responsible for the state record brown trout, state record rainbow trout, state record smallmouth. It held the spotted bass record, but has recently been broken, and the Bartram bass state record. So it's a very popular lake for fishing. However, if you are going to be a trout fisherman on this lake, you better have the equipment to go down and get them, because in the summer and winters, you're fishing in around 100 feet deep. And when this lake was made, it was only clear cut to 100 feet. So if you go into the wrong part of this lake and your electronics aren't the best, you could find yourself in what we call a ghost forest and 100 feet down and lose every bit of tackle you have in a matter of seconds.
I assume there's guides or somebody that can help you?
Yes, ma'am. There are a few guides out here. Sam Jones is probably the most successful guide out here, and he is with Jocassee Charters, located right down the road from the lake here. You also have James Couch that you can go out with. However, he only does night trips. So if you don't like to stay out all night long, you might want to choose Sam Jones. But they both catch good quality fish.
All right. Excuse my ignorance, but do you do this only from the boat or from the shores, or how does that work?
Well, because of the depth out here, you're not going to have a lot of success fly fishing off the bank, or even, honestly, pole fishing off the bank. Some people do catch a few. But primarily, you're going to go out of a boat using a pole. But if you're going to be trout fishing, you're going to be using something called a downrigger. And it's actually connected to your boat, and it sends a very large weighted ball down to a described depth. And then you have clips that go onto your fishing line, which is also connected to your pole, that go down to that depth, and it helps them maintain the depth that you're running. So there's a lot of equipment that goes on out here because of how deep this lake is.
So can you rent this equipment?
If you have your license, I don't think anyone actually rents fishing equipment out here, but there are plenty of charter guides that will actually go out, and they have everything you need once you get out there.
What about fishing in the creeks and rivers?
Yeah, when we go out camping, I usually try to catch supper with my fly rod and a popping bug, fishing all these blowdowns there's a lot of structure on the shore of the lake, and the small brim and occasionally a bass will thrill me for the day. And my wife just loves it when I hook a nice tiny brim and it goes flying over the boat on the other side. She thinks that's so funny. But I can catch a lot of fish, but they're small, generally small, and I don't mind eating the small fish. They taste good too.
Many thanks to Brooks, Cheryl, Dan, and Zach for coming on the show today and giving us their truly local insights into what the best Lake Jocassee and Devil's Fork State Park have to offer. Like I mentioned earlier, South Carolina has got it going on when it comes to state parks. Devil's Fork State Park is one of 47 in this small little state, 47 state parks, 14 of which have cabins. And they have a really nice visitor's guide that tells you all about the different parks. I'll put a link to the website on the show notes and on the webpage, and try to get as much information on the website as I can for you to explore this great treasure. Before I let you go, there's one really, really important thing you need to know about this area. It is very remote, and you need to bring in all your food and beverage because there's limited resources. You can pick up a couple little snacky things at the visitor center, which is a nice little visitor center, but the town is a bit of a ways away. You pass one small grocery store with a very limited supply, so you best bring coolers to get yourself there, to get what you need. And of course, once you're in the cabin, you'll have electricity and refrigerator and freezer. Camping, you're going to need to get ice and all that kind of stuff. But it is well worth it. It's exciting to have such a wonderful facility in such a remote area that even though you've got all the comforts of home in these lovely cabins, you are out in the wild. And it's just a beautiful, rugged wilderness that I'm just so grateful to have been able to share that with my mother and to be able to share that with you. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please share it with your friends and family. That's the best way for the word to get out about the Active Travel Adventures podcast. And I do encourage you to look up and check out the new podcast, Adventure Travel Show Podcast, the companion podcast to this that comes out every other Thursday. So it looks like I'll be seeing you every week now, hopefully. Until next time, this is Kitten Parks. Adventure on!